Mozart lived from 1756 to 1791. He was knighted by the Pope at age 14, when after one hearing he wrote out a famous choir work performed in the Sistine Chapel. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was an Austrian composer, pianist, and violinist. His father was a composer and violinist. Mozart was a child prodigy who began writing music before the age of 5. He rebelled against the social restrictions of the patronage system, which resulted in his dismissal by his patron, the Archbishop of Salzburg. Mozart then began a career as a freelance musician at age 25. Salzburg, where Mozart was born, is in the northwest corner of Austria. Vienna, where he worked in his later life, is on the eastern side of Austria. Wolfgang Mozart's father, Leopold, was father to 6 children. The only 2 that survived infancy were Wolfgang and Marie Anne, known as Nanner to differentiate her from her mother. Leopold was an excellent violinist and a good composer, employed by the Archbishop of Salzburg. He wrote a method book called The Violin School that was one of the best violin method books of the day. He was a very domineering man who strove to ensure his children's success. He organized concert tours for Wolfgang Mozart and his sister Nanner. Wolfgang Mozart moved to Vienna at the age of 25 after his dismissal by the Archbishop of Salzburg. He struggled financially because he did not have a steady income provided by a patron. In 1782, he married his landlord's daughter, Costanza Weber, against his father's wishes. He reached the peak of his career in the late 1780s with his 3 comic operas, which were a result of collaboration with librettist Lorenzo da Ponte. His health declined, though he continued to produce masterpieces such as his clarinet concerto and final opera, The Magic Flute, in 1791. He began the composition of a Requiem Mass that was commissioned by a count. He had a notion that he would not live to finish the Requiem Mass. He died on December 4th, 1791, at the age of 35. Possible causes of death include rheumatic fever, heart disease, and trichinosis. Mozart wrote more than 20 operas in different genres: opera buffa, Italian comic opera; opera seria, Italian serious opera; and Singspiel, a lighter form of German opera that included spoken dialogue. Mozart's music was catalogued chronologically by Ludwig Köchel. Works are now listed with a K number followed by a number. The chronology of Mozart's music is being revised continuously. Mozart is known for his simple, elegant, and tuneful melodies. His instrumental music conveyed a range of moods from dramatic to lively and playful. Like Haydn, Mozart favored the string quartet. Mozart was also one of the most outstanding pianists of his time. He wrote many works for the piano and more than 40 symphonies. Mozart's social music include divertimentos and serenades. One such piece is Eine kleine Nachtmusik from 1787, a serenade for strings. Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik, K. 525, is one of the most famous chamber music works of the era. The title literally means a little night music. It is a serenade for strings, written for a string quartet with an added double bass. It was a piece written for outdoor public performance. There are 4 movements. Originally there were 5. The first movement is in G major in sonata allegro form. Listen for a march-like disjunct melody and an ascending rocket theme, and a graceful descending tune of the second theme. A quick tempo in duple meter. The harmony is consonant with a homophonic texture. The second movement of Eine kleine is a rondo-like structure. The tempo is andante, walking pace, and in the key of C major. The third movement is allegro in G major and is in minuet and trio form. The fourth movement is allegro in G major as well, and the form is a sonata rondo form, which is a hybrid between sonata form and rondo form. The symphony was the principal instrumental form of the classical era. It had its roots in the Italian opera overture that was an orchestral piece in three-part form: fast, slow, fast. Eventually these parts became separate movements in which different effects were added. Rocket themes, which are characterized by a quick rise from the low to the high register, and steamroller effects, which are long, drawn-out crescendos, became standard in the classical symphony. These effects are attributed mostly to composers who were active in Mannheim, a German city along the Rhine River. This group of composers, known as the Mannheim School, also added a minuet and trio movement, making it a four-movement form that paralleled the form of the string quartet. The classical orchestra generally consisted of 30 to 40 players. It was centered on the string section. The early classical orchestra generally had woodwinds and brass in pairs to provide color, body, and sound mass, as well as to assist the strings. The interchange and imitation of themes among the various instrument groups may be compared to a lively conversation. The first movement is often a fast tempo, the second a slow, the third a moderate tempo, usually a dance-related movement, such as a minuet and trio, and the fourth movement is often a fast movement. The first movement of a symphony is in sonata allegro form, which is based on the premise that the piece begins in the tonic key, departs, then returns, and that each key area is associated with a theme. There are three sections in sonata form: exposition, development, and recapitulation. In the opening section of the exposition, several themes are presented in two contrasting keys. A theme that consists of several ideas is called a theme group. Sometimes a sonata allegro movement can be based on a single theme, which was often a preference of Haydn. Then it is referred to as monothematic. The development and recapitulation sections of the sonata allegro form found in the first movement of the symphony employ the same devices and structure as that of a string quartet, which was described previously. The slow movement of a symphony, the second movement, is often in a three-part form, A, B, A. Other common forms include theme and variations and modified sonata allegro form. Generally, the tempo is largo, adagio, or andante in a contrasting key rather than the tonic, with an orchestration that favors the woodwinds. The mood is more lyrical than that of the first movement, and there is less thematic development than in the first movement. The third movement of a symphony is the minuet and trio movement in triple meter. Just as in the string quartet, the form is A, B, A with a moderate tempo. Beethoven replaced the minuet and trio movement with a scherzo, as exemplified in his Fifth Symphony. A scherzo is in triple meter and is a very fast tempo. The fourth movement, or finale, of a symphony is normally a very lively allegro molto, or presto in rondo or sonata allegro form. It is at a faster tempo, but also lighter in mood than the first movement, so the cycle can be brought to an uplifting end. Haydn's output included 68 string quartets, over 100 symphonies, including the 12 London symphonies, and sacred vocal music such as masses, and two very successful oratorios, The Creation and The Seasons. Haydn's Symphony No. 100, The Military, was part of his last set of 12 works, known as the London Symphonies, which were commissioned for a concert series in London. This particular symphony was premiered in London in 1794 during his second London visit and was received enthusiastically by the audience. The nickname military comes from the composer's use of percussion instruments associated with Turkish military music, such as the triangle, cymbals, bass drum, and bell tree. The work also contains a solo trumpet fanfare, which is also a military effect. The second movement of Haydn's Military Symphony is an allegretto movement in the contrasting key of C major. Listen for a simple graceful theme in regular phrases with a march-like rhythm in regular duple meter. There is a shift in the harmony from C major to C minor, then back to C major. The texture is homophonic. It is in a three-part form, ternary, A, B, A, with the return of A in variation. The A section is in a rounded binary form. With regard to expression, listen for sudden dynamic contrasts. This piece was written for a large orchestra, including woodwinds, trumpets, French horns, and many percussion instruments not typically found in orchestras of this era. The symphony was an important vehicle used by Beethoven to address his public. Of his 9 famous symphonies, the first 2 symphonies are closest in style to the classical composers such as Haydn and Mozart who preceded him. Beginning with his 3rd symphony, his style was his own. Beethoven's 5th symphony is considered to be the ultimate model of the genre. The finale of the 9th, or choral symphony, uses vocal soloists and chorus, along with the orchestra, and it is a setting of Schiller's Ode to Joy, which forecasts that all people be brothers. Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany, into a troubled family situation. As his father was prone to alcoholism, he was required from the age of 11 to support his mother and 2 younger brothers by performing as an organist and harpsichordist. At the age of 17, he played for Mozart in Vienna, improvising so well that Mozart said to his friends, "Keep an eye on him. He will make a noise in the world some day." Although he was not attached to the court of a prince, he was helped by the aristocracy who paid him well for lessons or presented him with gifts. Eventually, he was able to move to Vienna, where, accompanied by letters from the German aristocracy, he was welcomed and treated as an equal rather than as a servant. In Vienna, Beethoven operated under a modified patronage system. He was not responsible to a specific patron, but was supported financially by many different patrons. His career was further aided by the emergence of the middle-class public, which brought revenue through the growth of concert life and music publishing. Beethoven began to suffer a hearing loss in his late 20s that eventually led to total deafness. His infirmity brought a sense of isolation to the composer, and his personality became that of an eccentric genius. A ride in an open carriage during severe weather brought on an attack of edema that was ultimately fatal. He died at the age of 57, at the height of fame and reverence. Beethoven's compositional activity falls into 3 periods. The first was reflective of the classical influence of composers such as Haydn and Mozart. The middle period saw experimentation with elements more associated with the 19th century Romantic era. Beethoven's late works used more chromatic harmonies and were stripped of conventions that were non-essential to his expressive intent. In Beethoven's own words, "I carry my thoughts about with me for a long time, before writing them down. I change many things, discard others, and I try again and again until I am satisfied. I turn my ideas into tones that resound, roar, and rage, until at last they stand before me in the form of notes." End of Part 2.